In this video, let's take a look at what it takes to create something in ZBrush, maybe using Dynamesh, and then bring it into Maya, animate it, and then bring it into Unity 3D and set it up with some sort of animation controller or button. So I'm not looking to do anything complex, just something really simple, just so we have a clear understanding of the steps required to jump from one program to the next. So let's do something really simple. I'm going to grab my sphere here, turn it into Polymesh 3D, and I'm just going to drag it out on my screen and go to my edit mode. And let's just make some kind of a simple change to the sphere. So for example, maybe I can grab my slice here and just do something like that. One thing I do want to do is I want to turn into Dynamesh actually. So I'm going to turn it to Dynamesh, press Control W to make a new poly group. And let's do this again. I'm going to create a new group, something like that. And now I'm going to hop into my geometry and go to Dynamesh and make sure my groups are on. Okay. Now with the groups on, I can do a polish by feature with the open circle, just so I have some kind of a detail to mess around with. So in this case, I just have this ball. And another thing we could do, just to make it more interesting, is let's assign some color to it. So maybe we'll make it kind of a blue, do a fill object, and let's change the material to something that we can see, so like a skin shade. All right, I'm gonna press Control Shift and let's assign maybe like an orange to this color. All right, Control Shift and click, bring it back. And so here we have a Dynamesh, and let's assume this is some kind of a complex character, right? So maybe one other thing we could do is let's grab our standard brush, and with the add-on, I'm gonna leave the add-on just so we also can see how the normal map works as well. So let's change this to like a bright yellow and say, I'm just gonna say hello. Something really simple. And the idea here is we want to take our Dynamesh and bring it into Maya and Unity as a game object. So right now, obviously, this is not a game object. We have 44,000 points, and that's just way too many points, right? So let's turn this into a game object with a texture and a normal map. All right. So the very first step is going to be jumping into Subtool, and let's create a duplicate. Once we created the duplicate, I'm actually going to hide my Dynamesh original version, and I'm going to go to Geometry and Z Remesher. All right. And what I would like to do is I'm going to keep the groups on, and let's turn this on so we could see what's happening, and just go ahead and Z remesh this thing. Now watch our points that we just went from 44,000 to 4,000. The second number is obviously includes the both meshes. We just want to look at the top one. So we're at 4,000. Let's say half, and do this one more time. 2,000. I'm just gonna keep going. And 916. All right. So that's pretty nice and light. I'm happy with that as a game model. Let's say, for example. All right. I'm gonna turn off my wireframe, go back to the subtool, And now what I want to do is I want to subdivide this enough times to hold the geometry of this other mesh, right? So if this was a complex character with maybe a facial expressions or some, skin texture or wrinkles, we want to make sure that we have enough geometry here to hold all of this in order to transfer the texture over from the Dynamesh over to this low poly version. So to do that, I'm going to go to geometry and I'm going to divide, and I can just hold down Control and press D a couple times. So pressing it 6 times gives me 935,000 polygons, and that should be more than enough to hold information from our Dynamesh. Okay, so now with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and unhide my other original Dynamesh, and I'm going to go to project, is put my distance all the way to the right, change my mean all the way to the right, and then put blur all the way to the left. Alright, and once that is done, I'm going to simply say project all. And yes, I would like to keep the poly paint. Alright, I'm going to say yes. Now if I hide my Dynamesh, I could see that my new sphere is now painted with correct colors, and it has the bevel hello on it. Now keep in mind, this is our 3D sphere, not the Dynamesh, right? So if I go to the geometry tab, I can dial this down and make sure that yes, indeed, this is our low poly mesh, which now has the correct poly paint on it. So our next step obviously is going to be to take this poly paint and turn it into texture. So to do that, I'm going to go to Z plugin and click on UV Master. I'm going to turn off symmetry, leave the poly groups on, and you know what? I'm going to actually work on clone. So by pressing work on clone, ZBrush created a clone for me that I can unwrap. So again, I'm going to leave the poly groups on. Now if we turn this on, we could see that this is indeed an exact clone of our previous sphere. Alright, so poly groups are on, and I'm going to say unwrap. Once that's done, I can actually flatten it and take a look and see exactly how it was unwrapped. So let's say I'm pretty happy with this and we are ready to move on. So I'm going to unflatten. I'm going to say copy UVs, go to my other object and say paste UVs. Okay, now if I bring my division back up, I can actually go to texture map, and let's go to UV map and make sure that it's set to 2000. That's pretty good. Alright, go to texture map and go to create, and now if I say new from Polypaint, you could see that our texture has been created from Polypaint, right? And if I turn this off and back on, I could see that nothing changes, meaning this is indeed a really nice texture. Okay, the other thing that I would like to create is my normal map in order to carry over this nice bevel effect to our low poly sphere. So to do that, I'm going to go to my geometry, turn this all the way down, and then go to normal maps and say create a normal map. Okay, let's take a look. Here's our really nice looking normal map. Very nice. Okay. So let's say we're done. Let's say that we have this really cool low poly sphere. It only has 916 polygons. And we have a really nice texture map and a beveled hello with our normal map. So next thing we want to do is take this and bring it to Maya. So to do that, I'm actually gonna use we could use GoZ, but instead let's just simply exported manually. So to do that, I'm going to go to Multi-Map Exporter. And let's just decide what we want to bring with our model. So I know I want the normal map. I do want the texture from the poly paint. I don't really care about ambient occlusion or cavity. I do want to export the mesh. And my map is set to 2000. Let's look at other export options. So under normal map, I'm not going to change anything here, but one thing I want to make sure is that this is not selected. In order for us to export this mesh as one solid object, make sure your polygroups are not selected. The quads are on. We want the mesh to have quads. And I'm just going to say create all maps. I'm going to go to my desktop and create a new folder and just call this sphere test. Say create, and I'll call this a 3D ball. All right, I'm going to say save. Okay, once everything is done, let's go ahead and fire up Maya. This is Maya 2018. One thing I want to point out is that in settings, my units are set to centimeters, but one thing that I did do in order for this to match up with Unity nicely is I went to display, and under grid, I made my grid much larger. So I set it to 250 units by 70 units to kind of match up with Unity a little better. All right. So next I'm going to say file import, go to my desktop and grab my sphere test. And what I want is this OBJ file. So I'm going to double click on that. And as you can see, it came in really tiny from ZBrush. So what I would like to do is actually select it. And in my channel box here, I'm going to scale this, all three of them at the same time by 100. So something like that. Now, if I turn on my textures, I could see that my textures and my normal map is applied, and we can double check that by going to our Hypershade. Okay, once we apply our normal map, we can close our Hypershade and just kind of take a good look. As you can see, the letters are raised. And if we want to make this smooth, we can of course go to soft edges. So that works out really nicely. So how do we bring this into Unity 3D next? And before we actually bring this into Unity 3D, let's add a little animation as well. So I'm going to grab my ball, set my time to 50, and I'm going to press S on 1, go to 24, press S again, go to 12, press S one more time, and kind of move this up, just creating like a little bounce effect. Okay, so our first animation is just simply bouncing ball. From 24 to 50, let's create a scale effect. So I'm going to go to 50, press S, go to 35, press S, and then just simply scale this up. So now we kind of have a bounce and a scale. Now the only reason I just added these simple animations is just so we can have something in Unity to play around with. All right, so that works out well. Let's go ahead and do a file, export all, and let's go ahead and export this as an FBX file, and we'll just call this 3D ball. Export all. All right, so let's go ahead and fire up Unity next. I'm actually going to say new project. And I'm going to leave it on my desktop, and let's call it 3D bowl test. All right. And I'm going to say create project. All right, so here we are in Unity. So next, obviously, we need our 3D bowl. So let's grab that. So here it is. Here's mine. So here's my FBX file, my normal map, and my texture. I don't need the BMP file, the OBJ, or the material. So I'm just going to take this, and I'm just going to drag this into my assets folder. Okay. Once that's done, let's go ahead and drag our 3D bowl into our game, and we can of course also drag the texture. Open this up, and we have a normal map, so let's grab our normal map and plug that in as well. So fix that. Let's make sure that that Unity actually knows that this is a normal map. So I'm going to select my normal map and make sure that normal map is selected, and my texture shape, I'm just going to set mine to cube. Fix edges, say apply, and as you can see, our bowl looks pretty good. So now if we open this up, we could see that we have the animation with our bowl, right? So if I press play, I currently don't see anything happening. So first thing we should do is create the controller for our 3D bowl. As you can see right now, there is no controller. So I'm going to right click, say create, and say animation controller. And if we wanted to, we can rename this as well. Call it 3D, or how about just bowl controller. All right. Now if I select my bowl one more time, I can either drag it, or I can just click on this button and just simply assign my new controller. All right. Now, since we have the controller, let's go ahead and go to the animator. And so now, as you can see, the controller is ready for our animation. Okay. So next, let's go ahead and click on our bowl and go to the animation. And let's tell Unity about the two animations that we set up. So we set up one called idle, and that was from 1 to 24. And let's loop that. I'm going to say apply. And the other animation was that was scale. The second one was scale, and that was from 25 to 50. And we'll loop that as well. All right, so here are our two animations. Once we have done that, now we can just simply grab both of these and just drag them on, drag them inside our animator controller. All right. So this time, if I press play again, let's go to our scene and press play. We could see that our bowl is bouncing, which is great, because that is exactly what idle is for. And obviously, if we wanted to do scale instead, then we'd just do a different default state. So let's say I'm happy with this, but now how do I play the scale with some level of control, right? So to do that, let's create a button that calls the scale animation for us. So to do that, I'm going to go to game object, go to UI, and say button. All right. Once the button is created, I'm going to open it up, go to text, and let's say play scale animation. All right. Let's go back to the button, add, and let's go ahead and grab our ball, 3D ball, and just drag it right in here. Next, I'm going to go to animator and say play string. And the name of the string that I want to play is called scale, because that's the name of the button, right? So here's our button, as you can see. Now if I press play again, it's playing the idle animation, and if I press play scale, it switches to scale animation, which is exactly what I want. So there it is. That's the pipeline to go from ZBrush to Maya to Unity 3D. And as you can imagine, this actually could be used for some complex characters, and your 3D characters fully rigged and animated in Maya could also be fully controlled with simple buttons in Unity 3D. So I hope this was helpful.